All right, good evening and welcome to the July 7th, 2020 organizational meeting for the Bethlehem Central School District Board of Education. The meeting was originally called to order at 6 and the board entered into executive session to discuss a legal matter, a student matter, and as well as some contractual matters. Please join me now to repeat the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have introductions. To keep it simple, I will do it for everybody, if that's okay. I'm Brittany Barrett, District Clerk. With us tonight is our board for the 2020-2021 school year. Alphabetically is Willow Bear, Christine Beck, Holly Dellenbaugh, Jonathan Fishbein, Meredith Moriarty, Chris Meyer, and Wendy Sampson. As well as our administrative team, we have Dave Hurst, Kathy Johnston, Judy Kehoe, and our superintendent, Jody Monroe. Next on the agenda is the appointment of district officers. So it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following appointment of officers, action items 1 through 6. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got it. First and a second, any discussion on these items? Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that item carries. With that, we have the next item, item B, is the swearing in of the district clerk, which is going to be done by Judy Kehoe on the district behalf to make it official so I can continue to run this meeting. So I'm ready whenever you are, Judy.
So just repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
The duties of the office of district clerk.
The duties of the office of district clerk.
Congratulations.
Next on our agenda, sorry, it's hard to stream both at the same time. We have the swearing in of our newly elected Board of Ed members for a 3-year term commencing July 1, 2020, ending June 30th, 2023. And that year, as we had mentioned at last meeting, is Miss Christine Beck, Miss Holly Dellenbaugh, and Miss Meredith Moriarty for their term again. So I don't know if you want to do it all together or separately, but I'm going to, we need to have you guys do your oaths as well. You okay to do it together?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the
Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And
the Constitution of the State of New York.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
And I will faithfully discharge.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
The duties of the office of Board of Education member.
The duties of the office of Board of Education member.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you so much. Item 4 on our agenda is the oath of office for the superintendent, which we also do annually at this meeting. So Jody, if you mind repeating after me. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
And that I will faithfully discharge.
According to the best of my ability.
According to the best of my ability.
the duties of the office of superintendent.
the duties of the office of superintendent.
Thank you so much. All right, item 5 on our agenda is election of officers. So at this point, I would like to request nominations for the position of board president for the 2020-21 school year.
Hey, Brittany, it's Willow. At this time, I would nominate Holly to serve once again as president. She did a tremendous job this year, dedicates a ton of time, and I think has a real strength in finding consensus among all of us. And if she'll have us again, I would nominate her to serve as president.
Do I have a second for this nomination?
Second.
Any other nominations for the position? Holly, do you accept the board's acknowledgement and a nomination of your name for this seat for this year?
I do. And thank you very much, Willow, for the nice things you just said.
All right. So at this time, the nominations for this seat are closed. All in favor of Holly Dellenbaugh as board president for this upcoming school year?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or any abstentions? All right. 7 for 7. Congratulations, Holly. With that, you will have to do an oath again. So pardon me. If you're ready, we can do that now. But let me just obviously officially say Holly Dellenbaugh has now been appointed as president of the Board of Education for the 2020-21 school year. And you repeat after me, your oath is the same. I do solemnly swear.
I do solemnly swear
That I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
And that I will faithfully discharge,
and that I will faithfully,
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
the duties of the office of Board of Education President.
the duties of the office of Board of Education President.
Congratulations. Normally I would say assume the seat, but I'm going to hand it over to you virtually and you can run with it as you have been. Thank you so much and congratulations.
Thanks, Brittany. At this point, I would like to request nominations for the position of Board Vice President for the 2020-2021 school year.
Holly, I would nominate Meredith to serve as another year as vice president. I would also commend her for the last year of service. I think you guys work really well together, are a great team, and I would love that consistency in place for another year of some really good work on the board.
Is there a second?
Oh, I second.
Do I have any more nominations? Meredith, do you accept the board's nomination of your name for this position?
Yes, and thank you, Willow, for those kind words. I appreciate it.
Nominations are closed at this point. All in favor of having Meredith as our board vice president for this coming year?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Meredith.
Thank you, Holly.
And you also have in another oath of office. So
Okay.
Repeat after me, and I should say officially, Meredith Moriarty has been appointed as Vice President of the Board of Education for the 2020-2021 school year. So if you can repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
to support the Constitution of the United States of America
to support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge,
and that I will faithfully discharge,
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
The duties of the office of Board of Education Vice President.
The duties of the office of Board of Education Vice President.
Great. Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
Next for this evening is our selection of our Board of Education committee representatives. The first committee on my list is the Audit Committee. Do we have any volunteers for that one?
I'd like to stay on the Audit Committee.
And I would stay on it too.
I'm happy to stay on it as well.
If there's no,
I don't care, Chris, if you want to give it a try.
I would like to try it.
Okay, so Jonathan, that's yourself, Christine, and
Chris.
We also have the next BCTA. Would you like to be on that one?
I'm sorry, what was that, Holly? You cut out.
The BCTA Process Committee.
Sure. Yes.
I don't mind.
I'd be happy to do it too.
Okay, so I have Chris Meyer, Meredith, and Willow.
Never means.
Also have the BC UEA Process Committee. Do we have any volunteers for that one?
I can do that one as well, Holly.
I'll be glad to stay on that one.
All right, Willow and Wendy, thank you. Next, I have the Facilities Committee.
I'd like to stay on that.
I can stay on that as well.
And I'm perfectly happy on that one as well.
Okay, I'm sorry, was that Jonathan, Wendy, and
Christine?
Stay on it also?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
For Facilities, Jonathan, Wendy, and Christine. I still have showing up on the agenda a Health Insurance Committee, but I think we decided last year to scrap that one.
Yeah, health insurance, and I also see school start time is still on there. So those both, we decided we didn't need.
Okay. So then the only remaining one is the Policy Committee. I would like to stay on that if I can. Is there anyone else who'd like to do that one?
I still like it.
I would be happy to remain on it, but it's my recollection that last year Willow wanted to get on it. So Willow, if you still want to get on it, I would be happy to give up my spot on that for you. But I understand if you don't want it this year.
No, I'm okay. I actually wondered though, Jody, if we needed a board rep or could put a board rep on the Equity Committee, I would be interested in that. But Meredith, I think that you guys are on a roll with policies, and I'm happy to just read them after the fact the way I've been doing it.
Okay, then I would volunteer Holly.
Okay, thank you, Meredith. Cody, what are your? Didn't know if you wanted to respond to Willow's question about a board rep Equity Committee.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. We're probably going to once we meet, we still have one. The current committee has one additional training that we never got to due to the closure, and then from there we'll probably perhaps break up into smaller groups or smaller subcommittees. So a board rep would be fine, although it wouldn't be a board. It wouldn't be a board committee. It would be a board member participating in a district committee. But sure, that would be fine.
That makes sense. If you could just keep us posted when that all shakes out, that would be great.
Jody, along a similar line, I was wondering whether or not we should have a rep on the district's reopening committee. And beyond just the reopening committee, I don't know if we're going to be having a committee throughout the year, just kind of like a health and safety committee, something, a continuous thing, not just focusing on actual reopening, but focusing on the continuity of health, of the students' health throughout the year. I don't know if that's a board committee or if that's a district committee that you'd like a board member on.
So that would probably be similar, probably be a district committee. Actually, I'm presenting on a little bit of the reopening plan, but it would probably be a district committee, and then we could have a board member participate if interested. I don't have that in place yet because we're still waiting on further guidance, but.
Okay, just keep us updated on that because I'm sure there's a lot of us who would be interested in serving on something like that because I think it's beyond just reopening. It's the continuity throughout the year.
Sure.
Moving on to the next item on our agenda, 7, other annual appointments and designations. Item A, 2020-2021 annual district appointments. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following other appointment action items 1 through 10.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item B, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following annual contractual action items 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item C, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following designation action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. D, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following authorization action items 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
Any abstentions? That carries. E, bonding of personnel. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following appointment of bonding of personnel action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. F, annual policy approvals. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following policy action items 1 and 2.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 8, approval of minutes. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the June 17th, 2020 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 9, Meeting reports. First up is our superintendent's report.
Thank you. The first update I wanted to do was a construction update. As you know, the closure of the district allowed us to get a jump start on some of our projects. So the high school auditorium, the air conditioning is complete. Curved walls and ceiling are almost complete. The stage rigging has been installed. Curtains in the stage shelves expected in August. The final component of the auditorium renovation, seating, is expected to start August 10th, and we anticipate that it will be ready by the start of school. D122 is complete, and new furniture is being delivered any day now. The high school pool, the new filtration system is almost done, about 70%, and we are expecting to that turned back over to the district at the end of July. The baseball fields, the high school varsity is complete, and the JV baseball field, the drainage is installed, and sod and seating is expected in August. In the middle school, the nurse's office, the asbestos abatement is completed with a new floor, should be completed at the beginning of August. The middle school upper gym received a new coat of paint and basketball hoops. The demolition of the old floor was completed. Concrete floor preparation has begun, and the new floor, bleachers, and wall pads should be complete by mid-August. The middle school kitchen freezer removal and dry storage area should be complete by mid-August. In the pool in the middle school, the new concrete floor deck is about 80% done. The new wall tile is about 50% complete, and the pump and filtration work has begun. Again, should be completed by the beginning of September. In Ellesmere, the new restrooms and storage rooms are about 80% installed. They'll be ready for the start of school. The main office, which is a big undertaking, demolition and abatement, are completed. The main office has been temporarily moved to the library, and we're expecting that to be completed in mid-August. Also, also at Ellesmere, site work, concrete sidewalk in the ramp near Herrick Ave is underway. Paving the back play area should happen any day now. There was a little bit of an underground issue where we found a fuel storage tank that was there, and it has been appropriately removed. At Glenmont, the roofing is complete, and the kitchen renovation, the demolition is complete. The subfloor and plumbing is being done, and the kitchen is expected to be completed by the start of school. So everything is anticipated to be completed by the end of the summer, with a few minor punch lists, some select projects such as the business office, the high school front vestibule, and the middle school LMC renovations. But the overall project is still within budget. I also wanted to address our equity work in the district to follow up on some of the recent information we've received on the Me Too Instagram account that was set up, as well as prior to that, we had received correspondence from students and former students asking us to address diversity better in our curriculum. So we had a meeting with our equity team several weeks ago, and we had a subcommittee meeting of that to talk about how do we best get information out to students in the community about the work of the equity team in general, and then what role does this group have in helping to move some of these initiatives forward. So in regards to that, we are planning to launch a webpage off the district site that is specifically focused on the equity work that's happening in the district currently and moving forward. In addition to that, we wanted to provide a spot where we could regularly provide updates to the community and also resources that can be utilized. I do want to clarify that the equity team in the district they're not the group that's responsible for curriculum changes. That group, the equity team, is an advisory group, so we can certainly work. We have representatives in all the buildings and departments to talk about all these various issues and how we can provide support and resources. But curriculum changes are either done at the elementary level through the cabinet structure, or through at the secondary level, the department structure. The English department is looking at making changes, and they're doing summer curriculum work related to that. But there's also, I wanted to address, we had several emails and correspondence simply about the high school curriculum as it relates to diversity in literature. And I think that there's a bigger picture than just that. We need to look at that not only in our high school, but in our elementary and middle school, and how do we provide more diversity. So that's in process. In addition to the website launch, or the web page launch, we'll be offering students, former students, and families and community members an opportunity to participate in focus groups in the coming weeks related to these topics. So that will be going out, and we're trying to gather interest of what times, dates would work best for people. Obviously, it would be in a Zoom format. So we'll see what the interest level is. And that would really, the goal of that would really be for listening, to hear what people have to share, hear some of their thoughts and ideas. We would have some members of our equity team participating in that, and then helping to come up with some plans and ideas to move forward. So I also wanted to address some of the recent Me Too Instagram information that we've all looked at and have been upset by hearing some of this. And that is an area that we will continue to work on. And I wanted to allow Dave Hurst to share some information about, in addition to what our counselors are currently working on and how to best address some of the concerns that were shared by students and former students, but also what our health teachers have been working on in the last, I think it was a year or so, they presented to the board, maybe a little over that. So if I can just turn it over to Dave for a minute to share some of that information as well.
Yeah, it's really, the last 2 to 3 years, we've been taking a much closer look at both our social emotional learning program, largely spearheaded by Kristen Connor, and then our health program with Fred Powers taking a lead on that. And in both areas, we're utilizing student survey data and student sort of anecdotal data to help sort of drive what areas we really need to strengthen our approach in. But so all of this is really operating under sort of a larger umbrella. So I'm just going to kind of talk through some themes that we really try to emphasize K-12. Obviously, as the students get older, the level of depth and maturity that the material you'd be discussing would sort of ramp up as time progresses. But sort of the overarching umbrella of the programs that we're putting together deal with, expressing and communicating healthy beliefs and preferences, resisting peer pressure, controlling personal impulses, practicing self-control and managing behavior, negotiating risky situations, choosing healthy and safe friends, establishing family and friends as support systems, solving problems, assessing risks, resolving conflict and coping with stress, asking adults for help, establishing healthy goals and plans to reach those goals, making informed decisions and anticipating results, and then practicing healthy actions. So those are sort of the overarching principles as we're putting these programs together. And I just want to speak quickly sort of in the area of, some of the disturbing comments that were made through the Instagram posts, ways that we are addressing, we will continue to address, and ways that we obviously can sort of improve upon what it is that we're already doing. But just so you know that, we do begin really talking about consent as early as kindergarten. They're not introduced necessarily to the word consent in kindergarten, but the idea of, sharing and asking permission begins as early as the kindergarten level. And then as the students, get older, it's a much more defined term, much more explicit conversations around healthy relationships and sexual relationships is where, consent is really focused. So one of the things that we've done recently too is we're bringing in at both the middle and the high school level, we're utilizing the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center to talk to students about building healthy relationships, healthy and unhealthy relationships, bullying and bystanding, dating violence, I don't want to leave any out, sexual assault, New York State consent laws. We utilize social workers through the Albany County Crime Victim and Sexual Violence Center for that. And we're also utilizing our resource officers. But again, based on the comments and based on each year we do the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and that gives us some insight into how effective the programs are, what changes need to be made. And as Jody alluded to, we have summer curriculum going on for English. We also have summer curriculum writing going on in health. And they're looking specifically at consent again, because I know that's an issue that's been brought up before. Really looking at, when is it appropriate to really start addressing that term in more of a relationship manner than just sort of a sharing manner. And, we're utilizing the national health standards to guide this work. But it's, work that continues, work that'll never be finished. Fortunately, like I said, we do have the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which helps in this work. Unfortunately, this year we were only able to give it to 8th graders because then the 9th graders typically take it during phys ed class, and they were due to take it in late March, early April. We just didn't feel it was appropriate to give that survey online, knowing that the data probably would not come back as valid as if it was taken in class. But in looking at the 8th grade data, students are making safe decisions for the most part, but we still have, for any given question, there might be 10% that aren't necessarily doing the right thing. So how do we reach that 10%? And how do we encourage the 90% to sort of, spread their knowledge, if you will, and ensure that they're not just bystanders, but they're upstanders. So, we're by no means finished with our work in this area. There's always room for improvement, but I do want to let you know that, a lot of thought and, there is a framework in place. And, I do think that, especially with our health department, they're working with our FACS department as well as with our elementary teachers. Holly, Matt, and Candy are really, working with teachers across disciplines to try to push a healthier lifestyle across all avenues. And, like I said, still work to do, but I think, we are addressing a lot of these issues. It was a little disheartening to read some of the comments and make it sound like we don't do anything. We're clearly doing a lot. It's just the message needs to be, I guess, firmer and more consistent. And there needs to be kind of more follow through, I guess, to make sure that, the lessons are learned. So.
I see a few people maybe want to ask questions.
Dave, I just want to, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I just want to confirm that there's also a component that addresses these issues with respect to electronic venues and social media.
For sure. Yeah, that's a whole component. And that's actually part. So now our librarians are involved, right? Because at the elementary level, we have a whole digital literacy curriculum now that starts in kindergarten. And that's really where we begin addressing, safe, smart choices when students are online, for sure.
Yeah,
it's more of a, can I say something instead of ask something? Is that okay?
Sure. I prefer that, sure.
Right, I just been thinking about this a lot. And, I read the many of the Me Too stories last Tuesday when they came out, and I couldn't sleep. I called Jody Wednesday morning, 8 a.m. I was just, it was terrible. And I think it was terrible for a whole bunch of reasons. And I think one of the reasons it was most terrible for me was like, I'm a teacher. And I think the number one thing that we should do for students is to make sure they're safe and make sure they feel safe. And some of those stories, it didn't happen, and this is me speaking. It's just my opinion. I just feel that we really need to work on changing our philosophy. And it's not just Bethlehem's philosophy. It's bigger than that, but we can start here. The idea that, I think sometimes we just start with, boys will be boys, and it's in doing so, what we do is we educate girls on how to deal with these situations, but just really leave it at, well, boys will be boys, and that's not good, and it also sometimes we combine it with the idea that an accusation like this could ruin a boy's future. Well, when looking at the Me Too account, we're not addressing what's happening with these girls and what's happening to their future. So, just to get really specific here, I think we need to look at harassment, in terms of when there's a group of boys, whether it be a sports team or a club or whoever, if the girls' tennis team walks by and there's a guys' sports team there, the conversation should be, good luck today. I hope you do well. It shouldn't be those other comments that we're seeing. I think we need to look at, talking to boys about the idea of combining consent and expectations, and reading a lot of that, the Me Too, there was expectations that boys had that were unreal, that, if a girl says yes to take you to a dance, that means that you can grope her, or that if she kisses you, that means she wants to go further. It's really getting into that deeper idea of consent and having those conversations, and putting this on the boys to understand that they play a major role in this, and it's not just all on the girls. And the last piece that I saw in terms of the Me Too was definitely with the sexting, and asking for naked pictures. That's horrible, and it's something that we need to create a better environment where a girl isn't so horrified and embarrassed she can't bring it up, and she can't tell a teacher or an administrator, because not only it's a crime, but also it's something that should not be happening. Obviously, it is happening quite frequently, and it's something that we need to, do better with, to create a better situation where kids are comfortable and can come forward with these things.
Yeah, I think, reading through those accounts was extremely disturbing to all of us. And I think that there's, as Dave said, we have been working on this. There's so many dimensions and layers involved, but, we need to do better. And I think that we can. And that's, I guess, that will be one of the goals of our work as we move forward.
And Dave, I wanted to ask a question. Who's responsible for the Boys to Men the program with the coaches? Is that Len overseeing that? Is that you?
No, it's Len.
Because there are comments on really I think very few coaches are doing what the intent was meant for, and there's nobody there to actually monitor what's being delivered and how it's delivered. And so we need to do it, definitely, if that's part of the curriculum development, we need to do a better job of ensuring that the message we want to get delivered is, and not just to have it out there just for the sake of saying we have it, because it doesn't mean anything if there's no weight behind it at all.
Yeah, you raise a great point, and it actually makes me think back to the discussion we're having about our equity work, in that you can't just put programs in place and think that that's going to solve problems, right? It has to become part of the fabric of who you are. So clearly, the message is pointed to, yeah, you have this program, but nobody takes it seriously, and there's no real follow through. So that's a great point, that regardless what area you're talking about, right, just throwing programs at things, but not allowing them to become part of who you are and what you do, then they're just wasted programs. So
we just need to verify the intent, behind what we're delivering, and just working on changing the culture at both the middle school and the high school, and starting earlier. I definitely think it's a culture shift, and we need to make sure that all of our teachers are aware, and that there are clear processes in place and repercussions and what they will be, so that there's no question when a certain action happens and it's reported, that's the protocols that's going to be followed. If there's no deviation from it, this is what's going to happen, and that we have a zero tolerance for it, because the actions that happen to some of these girls will affect them for the rest of their life. That's it for me.
Thank you.
I just had a couple of comments. I know we discussed this, I believe it was a year and a half ago, where we spoke with all the health teachers and talked about really changing our focus from when we're talking about sex ed, from talking about refusal methods to education about consent. And I really do appreciate that our language regarding that has changed and our focus has changed. But obviously it is not, we can't go back in time and we can't change what we were doing 10 years ago. We can only move forward. And I think that we need to be moving forward aggressively with this because we can see the impact that not taking it seriously enough 10 years ago has had on our students of today. I do think it needs to happen earlier than what we've been doing. Certainly the discussion has to be, I appreciate that we are talking about the concepts regarding consent in kindergarten, but I think the discussions really do have to be in 4th and 5th grade regarding personal, issues about your body and also issues about relationships so that we get these kids before they start having relationships. That's especially true this year, just considering our students have missed half a year of social emotional growth and community, and I'm concerned about bringing kids back together again. There's going to be a lot of issues with that. I do appreciate your point about the Boys to Men program and the fact that we really do have to analyze whether or not it's working in the way we want it to be. And I think that would go along with all of our programs, all of our curriculum. We really have to see what our students are getting from them. And if they're not getting what needs to happen, then we need to change it. And we also need to look at the staff members who are presenting it and seeing if they're taking it seriously, if they have the right approach. If they don't have the right approach, maybe not everyone's meant to lead one of these groups, find someone different. And I think I don't know whether Boys to Men is the program that we need, but it certainly shouldn't be just limited to athletic teams. I understand the point was to have some sort of male leader that they respond to, but I think every student needs to be exposed to these concepts. If it's in a better program, it's in a better program, but it should be for everybody. And also just one last thing, we have a pretty stringent sexual harassment policy, code of conduct. We've put this stuff in, and we are going to be holding students accountable for their actions. So I want to make sure that we are educating our students early so that they know what behavior is inappropriate. I mean, I don't want to put anyone in the position where they didn't understand something was harassment and they're being punished for it. So if we have these disciplinary actions, we have the strict code of conduct, we have the sexual harassment policy, I want to make sure every single student understands it before they get put into that position, and they understand what the consequences of their actions are. That's it.
Thanks. Anything else related to that, or can I move on? I have a couple other things. Okay. On to something less exciting. We wanted to provide an update on the bus purchasing, and also we wanted to provide an update on the National Grid substation, which has kind of come back to the town for consideration. So I'd like to quickly turn it over to Judy to address those two topics.
Thank you. So let me start with the bus update. Today we had bids come in on the bond anticipation notes, which is the financing for the bus purchases in the last 4 years, in addition to providing financing for the bus purchases that were approved by the board and by the community for this coming school year. The note was just over $3.7 million, and we received 5 bids for that note. The highest was a 1.39% for a 1-year rate, and the lowest was 0.6656. So again, a very nice, low, competitive interest rate on a note of size. And I know we had discussed at our budget workshops, there were some concerns about should we or shouldn't we go forward with these bus purchases. It is my continued recommendation that we are fiscally fine to continue with the purchase of these buses. It's part of the overall replacement plan that we have put into place, reviewed by school bus consultants and affirmed by them. We are getting some very low rates on the financing of it. And then lastly, we are getting close to 2/3 state aid based on incurring the capital costs. They recognize that it is a lot for districts to absorb on their own, so we do have the aid to help offset that. And the debt service is the only piece that does affect us within the general fund, which we have budgeted for and absorb. So wanted to give you that update and make sure everybody was comfortable with proceeding forward with that.
Yes, I would just, guys, ask a question though. We just wanted to follow up with the electric bus. And I just wanted to know if you had any more information in terms of, you know, because I know the cost, I think, was our concern, being very prohibitive up front, but I don't know what I don't know. So I just wanted to ask you.
So this is something that I have been working with transportation staff on. We have had information come to us from 2 community members who have gathered quite a bit of information on this. So I participated on a webinar last week with NYSERDA to look at all the different vendors and to hear more about the programs that they have for the financing of these buses. That really is, I think, what the key consideration will be for us. The electric buses cost about 3 times as much as the diesel buses that we have been purchasing. Although the diesel prices are rising slightly over time based on enhanced emission controls, there's still a huge gap between the cost of the electric buses versus the diesel buses. So if we do not have the funding, it is pretty much cost prohibitive at this point. So we're doing our due diligence to look at what's out there and what we qualify for. And then the secondary element is logistically, how does that work? We've heard talk of range anxiety. You know, if we go out on a trip, are we going to run out of juice? Is there a charging station somewhere that the buses could take advantage of? How do the buses perform in cold weather? Is the battery life affected? Does the bus run, but the heat not work in the buses? Those are the types of questions that we have. And, you know, we can talk to some other districts in northern climes to find out how it's working for them. And it's quite a process to get all of this information together, but we are working on that, and we'll keep you posted as we get more information.
Judy, did you have an opportunity to either meet with or talk to Montreal, Canada about their electric school bus operations? Because I know that information came to all of us. And I think what was troubling to me was some of the information that's come to us seems to be contrary to what the group that we hired to help us with busing had come up with. And finally, in this whole clump, it seems that there are locations that have had electric buses running for a number of years, and that they've had good luck with them, and they're also being used in northern climes and public transportation over what ends up being long periods of time and high mileage.
Yes. So the meeting that was offered to us was tomorrow afternoon. We've declined that meeting because we need to find out what kinds of funds are available to offset this costs, and because we needed more time to research the specifics, we felt it was premature to have the meeting with them. But I had that contact information, and I indicated that I would reach out to them later in the summer to set up that meeting to hear about their experiences. The two gentlemen who had shared information with us did give a number of different contacts and references of people that we can talk to, which we will be pursuing. And I also shared their comments with the consultant as well, because I think this is a broad enough, complex enough issue that we really need to put our heads together on multiple fronts and talk to not only the districts that are working with this, but are the Canadian funding sources availability different than what we have? I mean, it might be a complete apples and oranges funding situation. So we're looking at that, we're gathering the information, but it is a fairly broad task.
And
so
the
we're
other,
not ready to buy them now.
The other question I had for you was you had mentioned that it was that the buses cost about 3 times as much money. Will they? The question that I would have would be: are they going to last 3 times as long? In other words, it's one thing to be environmentally sensitive; it's another thing to be fiscally sensitive. But I would have a hard time wrapping my head around a bus that's 3 times as expensive has the same lifetime as the bus that's at 1/3. Because that would cost the district substantially more money, regardless of any environmental or fuel cost savings.
Yeah, without grant funding to offset it, it's cost prohibitive, and I do not believe that the life is extended significantly. Essentially, it's the same chassis, it's made of the same materials, it's just a diesel engine versus the battery cell. So I don't think the life is significantly longer, but that is one of the questions that we need to get more information on. So
thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, on to National Grid. I wanted to make sure that both the board and the community was aware that the National Grid proposal to establish a new substation on their property at 105 Van Dyke Road is back before the town's zoning board of appeals, the ZBA. It had been there in 2014, and then they essentially had stalled on the application. And we received notice from the town that National Grid was back to pursue this further. The ZBA was very clear that the purpose of their review is to make sure that there is in fact a need for this additional substation, and also to make sure that National Grid has explored all possible sites in order to identify what the best location is according to the criteria that they have set up for evaluating the sites. The town, recognizing that this is a fairly complex area as well, hired an independent consulting engineer who's familiar with the power utility industry and is helping them with that review. So we have had some feedback from parents, particularly at Eagle Elementary, who were concerned at the thought of having a substation installed relatively close to the school. The consultants have presented information that indicate that those electromagnetic frequencies, or EMFs, do not leave the boundaries of that parcel, but notwithstanding, we still are hearing concerns from the community. So I guess the first question that we have for you tonight is to just confirm that you agree with us sharing out information to the community via the communications office to alert people to become informed about this. There's a ton of information on the ZBA's website. They have a whole dedicated page that has the transcripts and the records of the minutes, the video from all of these prior meetings that were held, as well as the most recent meetings. So we'd like to be able to refer that to people in the community to look at so that they can become informed and then have the opportunity to offer their comments to the ZBA on that. So if you all concur with that, we'll work with Joellen Gardner to get that information out to the community.
That would be great, Judy.
Are we taking a stand as a board as to how we, whether we favor or don't favor that citing? Because I remember when this was before the board, I remember speaking to the town about it at one of the ZBA meetings. And for all the reasons I stated then, I'm opposed to it now. And I didn't know if it was something that we as a board should be or could be taking a stand on.
And that is my second question for the board this evening. So because we're in a remote meeting environment, there is no opportunity to actually speak before the Zoning Board of Appeals. But what people can do is submit comments in writing to them prior to the hearing, which is 6 p.m. on July 15th. So that is an option. Individual board members could certainly send their comments into the town to be heard, or you could have the district, you could authorize us to send our comments in. The last time we spoke in the section of the hearing for opposition, our choice was, are you in favor or are you opposed? There was no middle ground. I spoke in the opposed section, but used that time to ask for additional information and to make sure that all of the key issues were taken care of. So, for instance, one of the concerns when I was looking at the footage of the meeting was there's a decommissioning of two of the substations, one close to Line Drive and the other in Delmar. And the comment from the consultant was that that was seen as a beneficial component to the program because they could decommission those sites, one located next to the Line Drive softball fields and the other in a residential zone within Delmar that's been there for quite a long time, a few decades. And so one of the concerns I have is I don't know that I would call it a benefit if you're then decommissioning two existing sites in order to set up a substation on this parcel. Because it is owned by National Grid, I think that makes it appealing for them. And because of its location to the main power lines is another factor why they are advocating heavily to let that be the site.
So
would be, go ahead.
Would you, do you want to collectively send something as a board, like was done in the past?
I would certainly be in favor of that because we can only speak together as a board. Individually, we happen to be members of the board, but we can't speak on behalf of the board. I think any real consideration comes by us as a group, as the school board, making a statement. And quite frankly, I don't know what kind of benefit it is to decommission those two sites that have been long-standing when it's unlikely that they're going to either remove or sell. They might remove the equipment or sell it or sell the site, but who's going to build a home on it?
And one of the other concerns is certainly during the construction period while they're laying their new conduits for this off of the substation to the main lines is those run right along Van Dyke. And my sense was they didn't really have an understanding that it's not just a 10-month school program where we have parents and buses coming down that road. It's in the summertime as well for 6 weeks. So it's high traffic year round, and we just want to make sure that they're aware of that. And then we also have the unknowns of what does it look like when we reopen, and do we possibly have increased traffic because parents are choosing to drive their students to school. So that's another thing that could create a massive snarl relative to and from school.
Judy, if you remember, at one point they were, I don't know if they were putting conduit or what it was, but they were, or sewer, but they were putting, they had some large excavation that ran the entire length of the 32 extension that went from the end of 32 at Elm Ave all the way down to Van Dyke. And that whole going down towards Van Dyke, the whole left side of the road was dug up. And there was a lot of delays because of equipment and other things during that time. And that lasted a long period of time. I don't know what it was for. At the time, a lot of us thought it was because they were laying the wires down underground so that they could have this substation. So I don't know if that work is done and has to be done again, or it's unrelated, but it's something, again, I think we should find out to understand what the impact's going to be.
And they are required as part of this approval process to submit and have it be approved a traffic mitigation plan. There's no good time to do construction. It's disruptive, as we know, to anybody who's dealing with it. But you know, it does end at some point. So I think one of our key concerns is just to make sure that they do properly mitigate those traffic impacts during the construction period. The construction period is supposed to go for, I believe, around 18 months. So not a short time frame, to be sure. So would you like me to draft up a letter that we can then send out to the board that you can take a look at, and then let me know if you have any other edits and changes for that? And then once you are comfortable with that as a message from the Board of Education, we can submit that to the ZBA.
Yes.
I'm in favor of it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that's the end of my superintendent's report. Sorry, there was a lot of stuff to talk about tonight.
Oh, that's all right, Jody. Question I had for you is whether we can put some information about the facilities update on the website. Not that I don't think everybody tunes in and watches our meetings. It might get more viewing by the community if we put something up there.
Yeah, we could do that and get some more updated photos as well. That'd be good.
And then the other question that I had, you mentioned the English department doing some summer curriculum work. Do you know if the social studies department is also doing curriculum work over the summer, looking at some of these same issues that have come up?
I know they discussed it at the department meeting right at the end of the year. I'll double check with Nick to see what their next steps are, but I know they began discussions at the end of the year.
Thanks, Dave. Does anybody else have any questions for Jody or Dave or Judy?
I do, but not about anything they talked about. But I just wanted to do a quick check-in about ESY and how prepared we thought we were and how that's all playing out.
Sure. So we started yesterday, and I'll let Kathy give you a quick synopsis of the first 2 days.
Okay. Yeah, so it's been a very pleasant surprise to the first 2 days of ESY. Kids came off the bus so happy. They transitioned into the buildings. We're in both Eagle and the high school, and it's gone pretty smoothly. Kids are figuring out how to wear masks. I was saying at the beginning of this conversation, not always in the right place, but they're definitely accepting guidance from folks. The 3 hours is really, I think that was a good amount of time. Kids that are in desks and then getting up and wiggling a little bit, but really working on ELA and math, and then getting their related services. We've got some families still doing virtual. So after 2 days, we've got kids coming in. We got them going home, for the most part, going in the right direction. We're doing the screenings, both staff and students, in the morning. So, considering that we pulled it together in 3 weeks, our first 2 days feel like a pretty good indicator. So we're pleased. We haven't had any crazy surprise that none of us thought about. Staffing is really on board. And I've got lots of pictures I'll be kind of giving to Joellen at the end of the week for some updates.
Yeah, that's good, because one of the things I was thinking of is I know we have a lot of parents, teachers, students nervous about the fall and what it will look like, and ESY is kind of a pilot for what the fall might look like. So I think giving people the benefit of seeing how it's running might be really valuable.
Happy to do that.
I just want to thank Kathy and all of her staff for putting this together. I mean, this wasn't a thing on June 5th or June 6th. I mean, the fact that, 4 weeks later we have a full program running is pretty awesome. So I know it took a lot of work, and I thank you for that. And I have a focus group of 1 on this, and the respondent loves summer school. He's had 2 wonderful days. So as a parent as well, I thank you.
Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, it's put smiles on a lot of faces, so it's been nice.
Thanks, Kathy.
Sure.
Next on our agenda is our board report. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who helped put together all of the graduation festivities and ceremony at the end of the year. And I particularly wanted to mention for graduation itself, the O&M staff that was out there spraying all the chairs and sanitizing and keeping everything in order, because they did a tremendous job on a very hot day. Christine had to leave the meeting, but on her behalf, she wanted me to let everyone know also how thankful that she was as a senior parent with all of the events, and how personal she felt that the graduation ended up being. And just as a parent, that it felt really, really special this year for the graduates. And she just wanted to thank everyone from the bottom of her heart for making it happen. I think was there a facilities committee meeting since the last time that we met?
There was. It was called because the amount of the change order was much higher than originally anticipated. We basically uncovered in part a misunderstanding of what we were told as a committee and what was intended. So we've put some checks and balances in place so that does not happen in the future. But in the end, we approved the change order because it was necessary and appropriate under the circumstances.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to add at this time? In that case, we will move on to item 10, which is our presentation this evening on our plans to reopen our schools for 2020-2021. I'll turn it over to you, Jody and Dave.
Sure. Okay, can you all see that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to touch on a few aspects of reopening our schools. So the first is Brittany, if you could go to the next slide, please. So this is our best guess at process. So if you recall, the governor ordered schools to close back in March, and then we were closed from May on. So we've been really working on reopening. It seems like for forever. So we've done a couple different surveys. We asked parents early on to talk about what are their concerns that they had, and we shared that information at a prior board meeting. Really, the overwhelming majority of parents would want to see schools reopened safely and want their children back in school from K-12. So we had got that input at the end of May, which was when we had started our plans for reopening. We have 14 different reopening subcommittees that are working on different aspects of reopening. We're currently following this Department of Health and the CDC guidance for schools. There are also a lot of states who have already issued guidance on reopening. So we're kind of looking at those to see what guidance are we likely to receive from New York State. We were hoping that we would get a little bit more guidance. Initially, we were told that we would receive something around mid-July, which would be next week. I did hear today that it's likely we won't hear or get any additional guidance closer to the end of July. But again, this is all, kind of third-hand knowledge from people who are on the reopening committee with the state. We do know that once we have that guidance, we will have to have a plan finalized and submitted to the New York State Education Department. And I'm not sure if it will require approval or we just need to meet the parameters. So that's still up in the air about what that actual final process will be. But we're anticipating that by early August, I would say at the latest, is when we would be submitting our plans to state ed for reopening in the fall. Brittany, can you go to the next slide, please? So I mentioned there's 14 areas, 14 subcommittees. So we have a very large document that eventually will be streamlined into one final document, which will be our reopening plan. But you can see these are all of the areas that we currently are working on and looking at things from health and safety in all of these areas. When we talk about building procedures down to actually, how will mail be distributed? How will, cleaning happen? Talking about food service, how will we get food to the classrooms in the elementary schools and the secondary schools? How will we separate students so we can have them eat lunch, but in a more safe manner? So all of these things are pieces of the puzzle in our reopening. So one of the big things that I've been talking about and our group has really looked at is a huge component of what does our reopening actually look like. And most of our classroom range anywhere from 700 square feet to about 850, some of our larger. So these are approximate numbers for when you put in 6-foot distancing in classrooms. So all the desks are 6 feet apart facing the same direction. This gives you an idea of how many students those rooms can accommodate. And again, this doesn't take into account some of the casework or built-in bookcases, or in the elementary schools, cubbies that are there. So some of the rooms do require some modifications. But this is just to give you a picture of what the classroom would look like with the number of students in the size rooms that we currently have. So our elementary enrollment for primary, you can see what the numbers are in each of the levels with the totals and what the change is from 19 to 20 to 2020-21. So Brittany, if you can click, you should have a little, yes. So thanks. when we first did the classroom capacity, in several of our buildings, we were finding in order to have all of our K-5 students back, we would need to utilize the gymnasiums and or cafeterias as classroom spaces. The problem that presents is if with the hope that we will be able to use gymnasiums to some degree, or perhaps use cafeterias, that would limit that space. So by using some of our RTI math teachers, because with many of the restrictions that we're anticipating about not being able to move kids in different groups of students, we were looking at having our RTI teachers push in. So what we're planning to do currently is we would use some of our RTI math teachers to add a section at a few of our buildings to get them out of the gymnasiums or out of the cafeterias and back into classroom spaces. All of our RTI teachers had been classroom teachers in the past and are willing to do this. And it's a better model for the students. It brings down the numbers so students can actually be in classrooms with a teacher. So you can see in this model in Glenmont, adding one will alleviate the need to split the class between two rooms, which then the teacher would have been forced to go back and forth between the different classrooms. So Brittany, if you can click again. The intermediate grades, you can see in two of our buildings, Eagle and Slingerlands, the same. This would, in Eagle, it would alleviate the need to use the gym and the cafeteria by having the RTI math teacher pick up a section. And as well as Slingerlands, the RTI math teacher would alleviate the need to have two classes share the gym. So we still have RTI math teachers that will be working with students in the district, but this will create a better model and have students in a more appropriate setting. And again, with this model and the numbers, we would be able to have all of our K-5 students in every day. At the secondary level with middle school and high school, this is just an overview of the actual enrollment. You can see we're down slightly between 1920 and 2021. You could advance, please, Brittany. So with the 612, with the 6-foot distancing, we would not have the capacity to have all of our students in every day. So what our plan would be we would create an A-B schedule where about 50% of our students would be on site on an A day, 50% on a B day, and on the days students are not in school, we would have them log on to their classes and do somewhat of a live stream, or in certain classes, they may be following up on what the classroom instruction was the day prior. We are looking very heavily at how can we get 6th grade in every day if possible. Dave Hurst and I have a meeting with Mike and Mark early next week to look at a couple different models, which certainly would likely require us to use staff a little bit different. When we had our last planning meeting, all of the feedback from the 6th grade teachers was they would prefer to have all of the 6th graders on site every day if possible. And if that required some changes to scheduling, that they felt that would be appropriate. So, but with the 6-foot distancing in classrooms, we would not be able, hopefully we can get 6th grade in, but we would not be able to get 7 through 12 in on a daily basis. So some of our next steps, again, we're still waiting from guidance from the New York State Education Department. We would need to submit the plan, as I mentioned, and then again, whether or not it will require approval or just an acknowledgement that we've submitted it, that remains to be seen, but that is where we are currently in our process. So that's my update on reopening. And if anyone has questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah, Jody, I have a question for you. Do we have any data in terms of from parents about parents that might not be bringing their kids back and want to keep their kids home? Because I'm wondering if that would affect our numbers if we knew that, 300 kids their parents didn't want them in the buildings.
Yeah, we don't yet, and we are going to put something out, but until parents know what the model would be, I think it would be hard for them to answer whether or not they would send their children. So we wanted to have a little more information and a plan to provide them. That was one of the things that we heard with the transportation survey, is that there were many parents who couldn't respond because they wanted to know more about what does this look like. But that would be the plan. When the majority of the parent feedback was not so much that they didn't feel comfortable sending their kids, that it was definitely, we want our children in school. Obviously, we want it safely. And if you look at many of the countries who have reopened schools, there has not been large numbers of kids who have not returned. So I'm not sure it'll be that high, but certainly there will be some. I don't know if it would be enough that it would make a difference in how many kids we then could have on site. So that's information that we need to find out when we have a little more information.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Jody,
sorry.
Maybe this may actually be a question for Dave, but I'm wondering what we are doing over the summer for our teachers, under the assumption that, it looks like there's a pretty good chance that there's going to be at least some remote component in the fall. What we're doing for the teachers to make sure that they are in the best position possible to be able to teach that way.
Yeah, so a couple things. First, we're putting together sort of a resource library of sort of best practices. I've had teachers share all of their experiences from the remote learning at the end of this year, and we're putting together sort of lessons learned, things to try, things not to do. We're going to offer trainings over the summer. The tricky part is it's virtual, and virtual trainings are much more. They're good in that you can have more people do them at once, but they're bad in that they're not as personalized, and it's hard to walk people through things if they're really stuck. We have a lot of different either grade levels or departments are doing study teams this summer, because some of the work, especially at the secondary level, is very subject specific in terms of how you would navigate that. So there are groups working over the summer on that. Our tech coaches and our tech integration specialist, Stephanie Berland, have been working with teachers all along. So we have a lot of work to still try to do. Part of it too will come down to, we still have to create the parameters upon which how this is going to work, right? Not knowing whether it's an every other day model, is it just once in a while model, that really changes the way that might look. So for instance, let's suppose it's an every other day model. One model that would work fine would be to have kids, when you're in school, obviously you're there, and then when you're not, you would log on and sort of the teacher would be live streaming the lesson. We had teachers come in at the end of June to sort of test out that technology, and it worked much better than we anticipated. So that is an option. But other courses might treat it more like a block schedule, where you're kind of just thinking of it as like an 80-minute block. So when the kids are with you, you're doing sort of 40 minutes worth of an activity. And then when they're not with you, they're doing sort of another activity that's 40 minutes, but they're not like listening in live. So they would still sort of check in as an attendance measure, but then they'd be on their own and have to turn something in at the end of that. So there are different models that we're looking at. Some work better than others, depending on your discipline. So there's a lot of work to do in the next 8 weeks still. But it's, things we are working on. The teachers are very concerned about going back into this environment, not having sort of a clear plan of what this is going to look like. So there's a lot of work around the planning of it over the summer as well.
There also is, one of the things we've already talked about with our teachers is that everyone needs to plan for lost instructional time. And by that, I don't mean whether or not we're remote or we're on site, but just the fact of transitionings having to potentially be longer, that kids need to have time to wash hands if they're wearing face masks regularly, building in breaks for that. So there will definitely be time that is not, that in the past was more available for instruction. So we're working with our elementary teams, and our secondary are working with other departments about really the essential pieces of the curriculum. What things, if we need to not include them this year, do we look to not include, and what things are essential. So there will be some work related to that in regards to streamlining the curriculum to the most essential standards and skills that we know kids need. So we're not in a position where if we do end up in a full closure, that we're not prepared for that, but just the day-to-day time that it will take kids for transitioning to classrooms, or the logistics of things will take longer than what we have had to deal with in the past.
Okay. The other question that I've heard, and you may just not have an answer right now, at the high school level in particular, was about grading. And if there's going to be a remote live streaming, whatever kind of a component, will we be changing our grading system?
We don't know that yet.
Yeah, and part of it also comes down to how often are the kids actually in school. I mean, regardless, we're going to have to be more flexible in the way we determine grades. But at the same time, kids made it very clear this year that they actually embraced sort of a traditional grading structure. They didn't like the idea of, nope, that's acceptable. They're like, well, what does that really mean? So still recognizing equity issues, that you'd have to be flexible in the grading system. I do think we'll see a more of a return to a more traditional type grading scheme, as that's what both teachers and parents and students have really, a lot of the emails that we've gotten where I just don't understand this, like evidence of learning. You're telling my kid has proven they understand this, but what does that really mean? So, yeah.
Well, I think we were trying to be very sensitive to the needs of all, whether they be emotional, socioeconomic, or whatever. And I think that we did a nice job with that. But I think I have to agree, going forward, we have to have some standards, because the last 3 months of school for some kids were a good educational experience, but for others it was not so much. So having those standards to say, look, if you need to be accountable for something this year is going to be really important.
Right. We agree with that. We've had a lot of discussions about the accountability piece. When kids are online, that they are accountable for their attendance and accountable for their participation and getting the work done that is asked of them. Because it won't be temporary. This is, more long-term, and we all have time to plan for it, and students and families have time to plan for this as well.
Jody, I had a couple of questions regarding slide 6 and the numbers that are up regarding the square footage. Do we know how many of each type of classroom are in each school? Because I noticed, say, even if we take an 800 square foot room, you say that would fit 16 to 18 kids. But on the next slide, where you talk about the numbers in the elementary school classrooms, say like this year, incoming year, Ellesmere Kindergarten, 41 students. So that would be 21 kids in each classroom. So how are we dealing with that fact? Do we know the square footage of each of these classrooms, that we know that we can fit 20 kids in an Ellesmere Kindergarten classroom? And what classes are only going to have 12 kids in them?
So the way we did this is our architects, and we have building plans with rooms with all the square footage, and they were provided to the principals. But the principals actually physically went through every room and outlined what the capacity would be based on all of the other components of that classroom. And that could be I'll give you an example. Mike Klugman was talking about at the middle school, by just changing where the teacher would be in the classroom from, say the front of the room is, facing me, changing it to the side. It actually made a difference in the number of desks and students you could get in. At Eagle Elementary, because the way the building was set up and they designed the cubbies, there's a lot of empty space, so that we would reconfigure how the cubbies were arranged in those classrooms. So in theory, I mean, you can look at a diagram of each building with square footage, but we really had to go physically to every classroom in order to assess that, because those are ranges given to us by the architect. I just wanted to give everyone, this is an idea of what the numbers look like in these different size rooms.
Okay, so you're comfortable in each of these schools, in each of these grades, that you can get those kids into those particular classrooms?
Yes, all the principals did a spreadsheet of every classroom with the actual capacity of the number of kids with 6-foot distancing. So we have that already completed.
Okay, great. And then you were talking about adding an RTI teacher, the RTI math teacher, into a separate section. How are the kids going to be getting RTI math who need it?
Well, we would still be able to provide RTI support. And speaking with Laurel Jones, who oversees the RTI teachers, with all of the students who need it, it would require some of our RTI math teachers to potentially travel, which we've not had to do. And I don't mean by day, but they may not be in the same building every day. And we might have groups, instead of 2 or 3, we might have groups of 4 or 5 kids. But keep in mind, the guidance that we have is that you can't there's 4 second grade classrooms at Slingerlands. In the past, what would happen is an RTI teacher would pull, let's say, a student from every one of those classrooms, with trying to not have cohorts of students mixing together. We're not able to do that, at least under the current guidance. So the plan was to have RTI teachers push in and help support the classroom teachers. And speaking with the teachers and in our planning, everyone felt that this would be a better model, and you're bringing class sizes down by doing this. So the teachers, a classroom teacher can provide more support than they would have if they had 24 students versus 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we're not talking about a whole class of RTI students with an RTI teacher.
No,
okay.
It would just be another section of that grade level.
Okay. And then I also wanted to ask questions about airflow. I know from everything I've read, it seems like that's really the most important thing that they're saying right now, that we need to have good ventilation. So I just wanted to ask about first of all, about our ventilation system, and also whether each classroom has windows that actually can be opened, and whether or not we're going to be encouraging our teachers to keep those windows open, even if it's not, necessarily comfortable, even if the wind is blowing some papers around. I do think that's really important. And along those lines, well, I'll ask you about that first.
So our health and safety subcommittee just met, and this was one of the primary topics of conversation. So airflow is a big piece. Fresh air, outside air coming in is critical. So our system does allow to increase that. We don't really have specific guidance about what does that mean, but Greg Nolte was going to follow up on, is there a recommended amount, or is it just as much as possible? We also talked about, with guidance to teachers, having doors or windows open to allow fresh air. Obviously getting outside if possible is always helpful. There was some guidance that came out about fan use, because obviously a lot of our classrooms do have fans, and the guidance was basically, I think, trying to recall the exact language, but you can use fans as long as you can guarantee it's not blowing on students. So, and initially the guidance was not to use fans. So I think the guidance will probably be to not use fans, because I'm not sure how you could guarantee it's not blowing on a student. So some of this information is getting updated regularly, but yes, we do have the ability to adjust our airflow, and our classrooms do have windows that open to get fresh air in.
Okay. And you briefly touched on this, but I think outside time, outdoor time is really important, not only for health, but also especially for the younger children. If they're going to be sitting at desks and not moving around as much as they are used to, I think that's going to be really tough. And it's really important to get kids moving and having that space away from their desks. So I really want to encourage more outdoor time, more planned outdoor time for each grade. And I was wondering whether or not we have looked into our outdoor facilities. Do we have access to tents? Are we going to be using any of our outdoor facilities? Do we have plans for how teachers are going to be sharing outdoor time?
Yeah, that's a big conversation. We are looking at tents. Renting big tents are quite pricey, so we're actually looking at purchasing as it may be a better option. Mm-hmm. At the elementary schools, there's plenty of outdoor space. We talked about having kids bring in a towel or blanket to go outside and sit down. That elementary students would be perfectly fine with that. Mm-hmm. But creating some more comfortable outdoor areas where students could go or teachers could go, even if it's for lunch potentially or a classroom. So that definitely will be part of our guidance.
Great, because I know that will add to what we're talking about, the lost instructional time. Yeah. We're taking kids outside and settling them down. I understand that we'll lose some instructional time, but I really do think outdoor time is so important. And we could learn, there could be different types of lessons outside. We're just going to have to think outside the box a little.
Yeah, we agree. Our planning group all agrees that that's really important.
Wonderful.
Any other questions for Jody or Dave? I don't see any. So thank you for the update. I know there's a lot of things we don't know, but I appreciate getting the information, even if it's, this is what we're working on, even if we don't have final answers yet. Next on our agenda is our recognition of public comments submitted to the board. We had 2 comments submitted this evening, and I will read those now. The first one was submitted anonymously. Good evening. I'm a former student and would like to bring to your attention an incident that occurred several years back. I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, and during my junior year, 2013-2014 in high school, I was being bullied severely by a group of people because of my sexuality. I was approached and surrounded in the hallways and harassed constantly. It got to the point where I didn't want to go to school. I eventually decided to talk to my guidance counselor about this situation. She seemed annoyed that I was talking to her about it and recommended that I speak to a dean. When I spoke to the dean, he told me that there were people who had bigger issues than me and to ignore it. Too bad it isn't an easy thing to just ignore. I was never asked who was harassing me. I was never asked if I was okay. My guidance counselor never followed up with me. Upon recently talking to other former and current students, I found that many of us had similar results when talking to members of the administration over the years. It's sad knowing that the #1 school district in the Capital Region is not a safe space for LGBTQ individuals. I believe the BOE needs to make sure that administrators are getting better training on handling these situations. I'm writing this comment not to get anybody in trouble, but to make the board aware that further training needs to be had. I do want to thank Willow Bear for always speaking up for members of the LGBTQ community and making sure they have a voice. With her on the board, I have hope that the district can change for the better. I hope my comment can be read at the meeting so members of the Bethlehem community can be aware of these ongoing issues. Thanks for your time. And the second comment was submitted by Eliza Cotton. As the students and faculty of Bethlehem Central High School, and I think it includes faculty because this was also part of the read-in event that took place a couple weeks ago at the high school. While we acknowledge that our school and district have taken steps to address the issues of race and discrimination in the world and in our community, they have thus far been insufficient. We have identified 3 areas where the district could make changes in order to work toward a more anti-racist, anti-discriminatory culture, a more holistic and diverse curriculum, more bias and anti-racism training and education for staff, and more student-run education and action initiatives. The curriculum at the high school, particularly in the social studies and English departments, currently teaches through one specific perspective, which is that of white people. We need serious analysis of what students are being taught and what stories are being told, as well as action through an anti-racist lens that makes changes to improve these faults. In the English curriculum at Bethlehem, there is currently one work by a Black author that is mandated, A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. This is unacceptable. The prioritization of white male stories sends a message that those people and lives are more important and needs to end immediately. By teaching from one perspective, the potential to learn about opinions, thoughts, emotions of others is lost. In the coming years, the English curriculum has to radically change to include more books. The social studies curriculum at Bethlehem is also in need of change. Our global history courses do cover world events in a somewhat Eurocentric viewpoint. When discussing colonialism in any period after, there is disproportionate time spent on European motivations, with less time spent on emphasizing their brutality and irreparable effects. There is also less time focused on subsequent attempts by natives to fend off this brutality and lingering consequences through the present day. Additionally, many events that are more modern, such as the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan, are glossed over, yet have significant impact on events happening in our lifetimes. In 11th grade United States history classes, there is a focus on the white colonizers and white narratives. Indigenous history is often glossed over, and stories of Black people in this country are often only talked about in the context of slavery and the Civil War. Additionally, when talking about the civil rights movement, the story of the fight for Black liberation is often very incomplete, leaving out important narratives and events. This is an active erasure of the history of the people of this country and the people of this community. In economics courses, we would like to see more taught about how our economy is organized to benefit off of the exploitation of minority communities, especially Black and brown people. Although we have identified social studies and English to be the main areas needing the most overhaul, we should not limit our efforts to just these classes. When giving math or science problems, we should include names that are not traditionally white. In art, students should study the work and style of artists of color. In performing arts, students should perform pieces and works by artists of color. The teachers and staff in our building set the example for the culture of the school. To this end, we believe that teachers need to be educated about the continuing issues of discrimination in our building, including but not limited to anti-Blackness, racism, sexism, homophobia, and transphobia. Until we honestly talk about the issues plaguing our community, we cannot begin to fully tackle them. Teachers then need to be trained about how to examine their own problematic behaviors and how they can step in effectively when witnessing problematic incidents. Additionally, teachers need to be taught how they can address race, gender, and the LGBTQ community respectfully when those topics come up in the curriculum. This includes mandating that any slurs should not be spoken aloud, even when they are part of a text. We recognize that the district has already done some of this work educating teachers, which we are grateful for and hope to see continue. We believe that in order to work toward a more healthy school culture for all students, the district must listen to its students and let them lead. For example, this past year at the high school, Alana led the school in our first ever celebration of Black History Month. This type of programming is great at continuing to better our school culture. We would like to emphasize that student voices and perspectives should be the voices of these programs. Adults should help the students in carrying out the students' plans. Students should not help adults carry out the plans of adults. We, as a school, have the responsibility to educate and combat the systems of racism and discrimination that we benefit from. These initiatives are the steps forward, and we all need to be a part of them in order to create a better school environment.
I just wanted to thank both those commenters. Those were both very powerful statements. So thank you for their words.
Next on the agenda is item 12, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 14.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 23.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. C, support personnel action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 9.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. D, other action items. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 through 6.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. Item 13, future meetings and events. On Wednesday, July 22nd at 5 p.m., there's a Facilities Committee meeting. On Monday, July 27th at 6 p.m., there's a Policy Committee meeting. Our next regular board meeting is on Wednesday, August 12th at 7 p.m., anticipating an executive session at 6 p.m. And the meeting after that is on Wednesday, September 2nd at 7 p.m., anticipating an executive session at 6 o'clock. I think as of right now, both of those meetings are scheduled for the cafeteria.
I think D122 might be ready for us, but we'll have to check on that.
And I guess it might depend on whether the executive order that currently expires on the 5th or 6th gets extended.
Right.
Okay. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.